And our company uses Periscope very heavily for BI, for business informatics and so forth.
Oh,
Um,
can we
business intelligence.
can we talk about that? Because that's another subject that we brought up, and it doesn't have to be a deep dive, but we talked about data ops, and we actually got a podcast coming out about data ops and even AI ops. So, as a fintech company, you need data. You're constantly looking at data. Um, how do you, from a security engineer standpoint, or even an infrastructure engineer standpoint, how do you handle data at rest, data in motion, PII, meeting compliance? I hear PCI, DSS. How do you ensure inside your flow of CI/CD that this is constantly being met for security standards and requirements that you have?
Yes, that's an awesome question. And I want to tell you about like there's a company I want to tell you about that does this super cool thing that you all are going to think is real cool if you haven't seen it before. The company's name actually is called Very Good Security, which is a funny name. It's not like it doesn't instill confidence. But what they do is they have if you're familiar with tokenization, that's the idea that let's say you have a credit card number, for example, or a social security number, and maybe you have it in a database. Well, tokenization is the idea that you swap out that credit card number, that social security number, whatever that data element is, you swap that out with a different number that can be indexed and looked up later and kind of swap back in if you want, right? And so you can kind of have basically a process that kind of anonymizes, or we say tokenizes, but it kind of sanitizes the data to take the most sensitive aspects of it out. And you can have a process that kind of repopulates that sensitive data, right? So that's tokenization, and there are other words for it, right? But Very Good Security does this interesting thing where they tokenize data in transit. So their product deploys as a proxy, and you write rules and configure things to basically, so like you stand up the Very Good Security proxy between like your AWS, web services and the internet. And Very Good Security will tokenize all that data that's being sent to your web services, assuming you don't need it. Like that works very well. And so it turns out that we are a credit card company, and we're a small one, and but it turns out that inside our company, we actually don't need credit card numbers very often. And so we have like external credit card processors, and we rely a lot on third parties that are doing the credit card processing, and banks and stuff like that. Well, like this has been really awesome for us to have this Very Good Security, tokenization in transit kind of solution. It's allowed us to really, like, if you're familiar with PCI, PCI DSS, PCI compliance. This is for like credit card compliant, industry compliance stuff. The name of the game with PCI compliance is to decrease the scope of systems, the scope of your environment. That's called the cardholder data environment, right? Basically, the scope of your environment that has credit card numbers and similar data, and it's allowed us to really decrease the scope of our cardholder data environment, which is great for PCI compliance. Makes it a lot easier.
Hmm. So on that on the tokenization of that, I know there is a lot of companies out there that with Vault, they'll use tokens with Vault to do their secret exchange of credentials and so forth. Um, I haven't dove off into this website yet. Very Good Security, but does it do things like switch out the tokens or so forth, or if someone has their token is attached to whatever information, is there some type of switch out? And that may be the wrong term I'm using there. with switching out tokens, but I think it's randomizing the tokens so that if someone ever hacks the system or whatever, the tokens are pretty much sharded. Is I think the word I should want to use there. But again, I may be using the wrong term on that one. But I'll let you tell me how it does the tokens, and if it gets hacked, what happens if I get hacked and my token gets hacked? What's the protocol on that, or how we stop that?
Right. So the entire that's right. The entire point of the token is so that you can get hacked and you're not losing anything sensitive. And so there are APIs which we also control and secure in different ways. But those APIs allow you to repopulate this data if you want in specific ways. Otherwise, it's doing it based on connection, right? So they've built this. Again, I think it's like a super impressive idea because it really takes a lot of pressure off of a lot of businesses probably if they use it. But like it they built some logic into their proxy that will basically, sanitize it and repopulate it for connections on the way in and out as necessary. Now, normally you don't like that information is not needed bidirectionally, but it's actually available if you need to repopulate, kind of send it back the other way, right? It can kind of do that automatically. But yeah, these tokens, the token numbers that you're getting in there, those are not useful to attackers in any way unless they're able to kind of further compromise very good security. And listen, nothing's foolproof, right? Like, I mean, it's like, or I should say that nothing is bulletproof. Like everything's, there's some vulnerability with everything, right? So I would not say that this is like 100% secure. It's just a really nice and kind of high value security solution and approach for us, which I had not seen much in market, honestly.
Right. We had actually got a question that came in and says, "What are some good examples of a bad security process when you got there?" What was you don't have to spill all the details. I'm sure you're still working through, but
Sure.
what were some bad processes and procedures that caused you to go home and say, "Hey, this is what you should be doing," or "This is what you could be doing"? Give us the details, Matt, on what you thought was a bad posture, and it may not be from their perspective. It may be in another situation that you experienced a bad process.
Oh yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggies is that we don't have multi-factor authentication everywhere I want us to, right? And I think that's been true kind of everywhere I've worked, to be honest, right? Multi-factor authentication is the single best thing that you can do to kind of improve security of an internet-facing organization, I think. And there might be some exceptions to that, but that's kind of is something that's available mostly inexpensively to a lot of organizations now, and it just really helps a tremendous amount. It is true, like I will say that like multi-factor authentication using like an SMS message sent to your phone has become like very convenient and easy, and that seems to be the way that a lot of people are implementing it. But that's not quite as secure as just using some of these apps like on your phone or whatever now. So like the Google Authenticator, if you're familiar with a company called Okta, 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 they have a very good sort of MFA solution that is where you can kind of move away from kind of passwords entirely and just rely on kind of extensive multi-factor authentication. Duo Security is another good one. Duo kind of has been a leader in the multi-factor authentication space for years now, and they just recently were acquired by Cisco. So now the question is, like, where does Cisco take them, right? Like, do they continue their roadmap, or do they do something different with them? But Duo Security is really good. Authy, there's apps like that, right? Especially so push-based multi-factor is really nice. Yeah. So just I would say, if you have the option, you kind of steer clear of the SMS-based multi-factor, but multi-factor is kind of the most important part. And then another thing was just, I think with Pedal specifically, my biggest concerns, and like there's going to be plenty of concerns anywhere with a company this young, but my concerns are probably around accounts management and authentication in general. We don't quite have the the extensive accounts management processes I want, and the authentication things that I want where I want them. And in some cases, like something I've seen in the past too that stands out a lot is just when you have a lot of trust inside your network, right? Where you've got this network perimeter, and once you're inside the network perimeter, everything is trusted, and you don't have to kind of re-authenticate ever, right? Well, you know, as we sometimes say in security, right? The perimeter is now the endpoint, right? Meaning your desktop, your laptop, your mobile device. And so, like, you really kind of have to protect those anything connecting to the internet kind of as your perimeter, right? And so, like, not having any kind of authentication within your network environment is a pretty bad idea. You still want basically user-based authentication. If you're familiar, if you've ever heard of Beyond Corp or Zero Trust networking, this is the idea that you kind of integrate identity and application level and device authentication. Kind of, you can combine some of these modalities, combine some of these things all into one, and basically you never have kind of privilege on the network until you establish and authenticate your identity and verify who you are and where you're coming from. Yeah, microsegmentation, exactly.
Well, not to cut you off, but one of the thoughts that I just had is, and I do this often. Walk us through your mental concept. So you went home and you whipped out a PowerPoint slide or a mind map or some notes, and you started down this path of trying to impress your new employer. But you started down this path of, let me put these details together. What was your mindset going into it? Like, what were the questions that you would ask, or that you thought you would ask?
Yeah, I think the thing I wanted to do, that I want to make the biggest impression around, was I wanted to show them that not just that I had like experience or whatever and could do a good job on security things. I wanted to show them that I could kind of fit with Pedal specifically, right? That I was adaptable, and that they could learn from me, but also that I could learn from them, and that we could fit together nicely, right? That I might challenge them, but that I would do it in a way that's consistent with their values and what they were trying to do. And so a lot of what happens in security that doesn't work well is that a lot of security programs or security practitioners are not really connected to the business value. They're not connected to the priorities of the business. And I just, like, it never fails to amaze me, like, to kind of look back on when I started my career, and I got started in computing and IT stuff, and working with computers, just because, like, I loved solving problems with computers and problem solving and stuff like that. But also kind of because I didn't have to deal with people when you do computer stuff, maybe was the thinking, right? But it turns out all of this stuff is all about people, So, like, you eventually have this kind of revelation that, holy smokes, I've had my head down in code, or I've had my head down in hardware or whatever for 10 years, and I really just should have been paying more attention to what people need and what people want and how people do their work, right? And and on toward, like, what does the business need, right? Like, how's the business actually going to work, and what value does it need? And so I wanted to show them that I could, first of all, execute a security program well, that's consistent with the way they operate, and that I could do things for Pedal, kind of the Pedal way, right? That's consistent with their engineering vision. And the other thing was that, that it was like, there's this way to do it that, with, there's an adaptable and and connected to the business value itself, right? So kind of connected to their engineering vision and connected to their business value. That's kind of where I came from on it.
And then when you put it all together, and say you've gotten a job, which you have gotten a job, that's obvious. Now it's time to take this vision and sell it to your team. How do you sell, one, take the approach of selling an idea to your team, and then two, how do you build your team? And when I say build your team, I mean there's gonna be some gap in skill sets, and maybe even a gap in mindset as well too. How do you build that out? And then three, how do you get your team ready for the next iteration of that project? Because you're talking, you want to grow, so you have to instill some type of leadership here. You have to instill some type of mentorship here, and you also have to instill some type of big vision and get the buy-in from them, because they got to work with you. They're the ones that are gonna do the work. So walk us through some of those thoughts and processes that you've had to overcome. I'm sure there's been some issues, some pushback. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, like I'll say, I think generally speaking, something that I would say about all those things you asked is that, I mean, I didn't, like I'm never really sitting on my hands. I always want to sort of try and be in a leadership role, or trying to be impactful, I guess I would say, right? But it's never me that gets it done, right? It's like I'm somebody on the team that's helping, and I think it's just super important to keep the perspective that that I'm playing a supporting role for everybody else that's trying to do a thing, whatever that is. And it's never really going to work. It's not going to work well anyway, if it's just the thing that I believe in and nobody else has bought in. And so I think you have to go to the table and you have to kind of connect with individuals, right? So something I learned a while back or that I feel strongly about now, is I used to kind of approach a room, like if you got a room full of people, I would be talking to like that room full of people as a team, right? As a body, as a collective or whatever. And if the team wasn't working well together, I had this question about like, why is the team not working? Well, that's never really the answer, or that's really not the right question to ask, I think. It's like, why is this thing happening with this person? Or why is this thing happening between these two people, or whatever. It's really all about individuals. And you can impact people collectively, right? That's obviously the case. But I feel like you solve problems and move the needle more by so I have this idea about problem solving, right? For like technical problems, which is that you kind of take a big problem that's hard to solve and you break it up into smaller pieces, right? Like, I mean, it's that kind of thing until you get a piece that you can solve, and you work the next piece up or whatever. That's kind of the way I do things with people too, right? Like, I mean, kind of debugging people issues, right? Is just try and break the problem down until there's a piece that I understand, that I can connect with, right? That I can connect with the person, about this one thing, and then we go from there and figure that stuff out. So I think a big thing to make it to what you were saying is just I'm going there. Like, it's important for me to kind of get the team invested in the problems that they have and connect our visions together, right? Like, let's find the common ground about what we're trying to solve or whatever. And the bottom line is, if you're not aligned about what problems you're trying to solve or what you're trying to make better, you're going to miss out in some way. You're going to lose in some way. So you kind of have to get that alignment, and getting that alignment is incredibly important. But once you have it, you have a lot more flexibility, right? Once everybody understands that everybody else at the table is there to work together, or is there invested in sort of a common interest, like a lot of the other kind of interpersonal challenges go away, right? It's not that everything goes away, but like there's that trust is incredibly important. And I would say that just like one of the things I did with Pedal was, I told them, listen, here's what I think the mission of security should probably be at Pedal, right? It's to generate stakeholder value by protecting the privacy of Pedal customers and developing the trust of our customers, partners, and the public, right? And so my vision for the security program was very much kind of like executive level, right? And it was that, listen, I'm trying to generate value for the company, but here's how I'm trying to do it is by protecting the interests of all these other people that we need, to support the company and for the company to do business and be profitable. And then I said, listen, here's some, my guiding principles for the way that we think about information security of this company, or based on what I understand of the company so far, would be things like observability and transparency and collaboration and sustainability and scalability and business relevance, right? Like just, what are some of the key concepts that we should keep in mind as we design security for this startup, and is stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of tried to lay out like what I thought the primary risks are for the company. And so that for me, this feels like data breach and fraud and kind of industry non-compliance and denial of service. And there's a million risks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these are the ones that I just kind of believe are probably the biggest ones for a company like ours.
Right. And
So
then,
I have a question.
oh, go ahead.
Hey Matt, it's Reggie.
Hey, Reggie.
So when you first came in, like what was I'm pretty sure whenever the security guy comes in the room, there's always going to be pushback, right? Um, so what was some things that you did to kind of get a little bit more buy-in from the business as far as making sure the platform was as secure as it could be, or if not as secure as it could be, that you guys were making sure you guys were going in the right direction?
Yeah, so I try and do this by try and solve problems for other people, right? So a big example is authentication, right? Authentication is something that people don't like you don't like the process of authenticating a lot of times, right? It's very hard to create a process for authentication that actually feels good to people. But if you're able to actually implement an authentication scheme that is an improvement for people, that works well with mobile devices, for example, I've worked places where, like in the mobile device era, where people, where you're expected to kind of put in a lot of passwords on like a mobile device. Well, that just doesn't work very well, right? So if you can figure out something better than that, and basically the deal is I try and earn their trust by solving problems that are relevant to them, but also do something for me, and kind of getting aligned on their interests too. And also I try and I try and stay. I never really eliminate velocity as a concern. So this idea of moving moving business forward and kind of getting things done, the velocity of business and all that stuff. If I could go back like 20 years and kind of tell myself something, one of the things I would say, I mean, there's a lot of things I would tell myself, but one of the things I would say is like Matt, you're very invested in security, but like don't forget about velocity, right? Like if your company's not adapting and moving forward quickly, then you're going to lose out to market anyway, right? And so you need to be thinking a little bit better about how you can accomplish velocity and make compromises around velocity. And that's kind of a big part of where the DevSecOps stuff comes in, right? Like DevSecOps approaches where you're integrating security into your CI/CD pipeline. Those things allow you to kind of maintain the velocity that the business wants, but also give you some more security control. So anyway, like I think just the big thing there is just try, like first of all, I think you got to be nice to people, right? But also just trying to get aligned with them to help them solve problems that are important to them. That shows them that you're on board and you're trustworthy, and they're willing to help you out.
So what I hear is you went in with the mindset, I'm going to put my team first. I'm going to find out what their pain points are because they're the ones that have been working there before you did. And then three, how to integrate their pain points into your vision and also have a discussion where their pain points are. It may not fit into this first part of this vision right now. It may be something that comes up later. And
Yeah,
that might have been
yeah,
your focus there.
right. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And one of the things that we did at Pedal is when I got there, we for infrastructure and security, we just posted a Google form and said fill out this form, and it was just start, stop, or continue. If you've never done one of these things, the idea is give me a little bit of feedback about things I should start doing. Give me a little bit of feedback about things I should stop doing, and give me some feedback about things you'd really like to see us continue to do in infrastructure and security, right? And then anything else you want to tell us, and let me know if you want like a one-on-one discussion to talk about these things. And just simply the act of kind of collecting some feedback, very valuable in terms of making friends at work.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have this question about, like, imagine you had some pushback, right? And so, like, just a little bit more of that question was, did you have champions who helped you persuade those that were pushing back? Honestly, at Pedal, I haven't had a lot of pushback, just to be honest. But it is the case that one of the ideas I really like in the security industry is this notion of security champions, and it's just a really compelling idea to me. The idea is, like, let's say you're the security organization in a company, and there's there are infrastructure people, and like there's like network people, and there's server people, and there are front end developers and back end developers, and data folks and stuff like that. Well, it's just incredibly valuable if you have sort of somebody who's almost like a liaison, or just a friendly, a friendly supporter, a champion in each one of those groups, right? And you can actually, people are instituting programs called security champions, and you can kind of get training related to building a security champion program that's really good. So I thought that was I want to specifically highlight those words that Michael was saying, yeah.
And then the other one, what I question I had is, how do you, as the manager or lead, or however you want to classify yourself, how do you stay trained up on creating the vision, number one, and then staying technical? Because I know it is where you come from. That's why you dropped your head in shame. I know you do it. How do you balance that, for yourself, because you don't want to lose your technical skills, because that's where you came from. That's your left and your right hand.
Right.
So you want to still be there, and truth be told, um, in case this blows up, you still want to be able to go out and create wealth for yourself. So, how do you balance that?
Yeah, so I think, oh man, Tamika, this question. Okay, so the the first thing I want to do is say that other people have probably got a better idea about this than I do. I mean, I'm still working on it, right? Like I'm going to work on this my entire life. It feels like my entire career, at any rate. But there's a lady named Charity Majors. I don't know if any of you know Charity. She's kind of an observability wonk, and I think she started the company called Honeycomb. So honeycomb.io
Yep.
is a company like oriented around kind of helping other companies improve their observability. When I say observability, if you're not familiar, it's a little bit like monitoring, but the point is, like, monitoring is definitely a part of it, but the idea is you should be able to ask your systems questions that your systems were not inherently designed to answer about why they are not working. Okay. And so, we have a lot of like log collection systems and time series database and stuff like that. But uh, can you connect, for example, this, like the web request that's coming in, to the database query that's actually slowing that request down, right? Can you do that, right? And if not, that's an observability kind of challenge, But anyway, so Charity Majors has some blog posts or tweets or something. I can't remember exactly. I guess it's tweets about a blog post, but it's all like, she kind of speaks about the pendulum being sort of technical, and then going back to management, and how that can be how that's kind of a nice solution for over the course of your career, maintaining relevance in both, right? For me, it's been really hard to do that. I've been really interested in staying technical, and I've been able to do that some. I mean, one of the short answers here is if you continue to do a little bit of work, it'll help you. But the honest answer is that engineers, analysts, whatever, architects, they have a different set of tools that they use than somebody that's in a management or director role, right? And when you're a manager, listen, you use a different set of tools. I mean, your tools are like, how you approach and solve problems related to people. Your tools are more frequently like Excel spreadsheets than they are, sort of like, some kind of IDE to develop in, right? And I think you can view it as a spectrum a little bit, right? Like you aren't having to choose one or the other, but it is the case that you are going to focus a little bit more on certain tools than other tools. I really like this idea of the kind of the T-shaped person, which is the idea that there's like like a person standing with their arms out, kind of, and like that their arm span is kind of the breadth of technical or skills that they have, right? It's the breadth of their skills, right? And then of course the up and down kind of the cross or whatever, like that up and down part is kind of the depth of skill that they have in an area, right? And so the idea is that, like, I really like this idea that you can be a generalist, and not just a generalist about technical things, but also about kind of people things, about management, about leadership of projects and so forth. And that you'll have, at different points in your career, you'll have a lot of capability and depth in like a certain skill set, right? And you'll trade that out with other skill sets over time, right? So like when I was like 20 years old, I actually knew a lot about backups. And I don't know much about backups anymore, right? Like I don't know what's going on with backup tapes or disk-to-disk backups or whatever, how people do backups now. Like I'm not that well versed in that technology. And that's okay, because I'm focused on other skills these days, right?
Well, one of the other ones was even I have this talk all the time. A lot of people are like, oh no, you should focus on being a specialist, or you should focus on like one cloud. But as the trend grows, the new thing is like Kubernetes is the new OS, right?
Right.
But as we continue to grow, what continues to happen, more and more cloud providers pop up. Oracle, Amazon, GCP, you name them, you got it. Some people just focus specifically on doing serverless. Some people focus specifically on doing Kubernetes. Somebody focuses only on OpenStack. And then the question becomes is how do you take yourself and not specialize and be the generalist on things, and it's hard because you really want to get in depth, like I'm looking at Kubernetes, but now I'm looking at Knative, and then I'm looking at kubeless, and then I'm looking at KubeSpray, then I'm looking at KubeVirt, then I'm looking at Nomad, then I'm over here looking at this, and the next thing you know, you have a general idea of something, but at some point you have to sit down and say, okay, I need to master at least one of these, or maybe you don't, but having the time to do it and then turn around and my philosophy is if I study it, I should teach it, because that's the best way to know if you know, and that's the best way to find the holes and the gaps where you go back and say, okay, well, you know what, I really didn't know a lot. I sucked at that. Let me go back and get into the details of that. So you balancing that and then training your team. Do you what? Because I run into this often, where or not kids, but people say, "I'm not going to go learn anything. You're going to teach it to me." What's your
Mm.
philosophy on getting your team revved up to say, I'm going to go learn this on my own? Or do you provide some type of training, or do you do brown bag sessions or lunch and learns to get your team caught up on the technology and the tool stack or whatever's coming down the pipeline.
Sure. So, yeah, first of all, just really, just a really great point about, like you're trying to figure out all these technologies, and it's just like a rabbit hole where you're chasing one cube thing after another, But honestly, I feel like it's really hard to support people that don't have a hunger to learn. Like that is just a really huge challenge, and I've been lucky to not have to deal with that a whole lot, right? Like most of the people that I've worked with, and I think most people, they are interested and motivated by something. Now the question is, can you kind of figure out, what kind of sparks their interest and what their interests and alignments, what their interests and passions are and motivations? Can you get aligned with that thing and kind of in the interest of your organization or the work that you need them to do, right? And when you've got kind of a big team, like you have a lot of flexibility, and that can work pretty well. Like I had a team of almost 40 people at a previous job, right? And they were kind of spread across kind of 3 teams, right? But I had a lot of flexibility to kind of say, well, this dude over here is kind of, like they are not interested, and they're just, like it's really hard to motivate them to manage storage, for example. But somebody needs to do that. But this person over here is super interested in those sorts of concepts. So, you make that work. But I think that, one of the things that's interesting about this moment that we're in IT is that there's a whole, kind of, I don't know if it's a generation, it's a group of people or whatever. There seems to be a lot of people that are, just they're sort of interested in, like they kind of grew up thinking IT was kind of just about like reliability and stability, and those are super important, right? But now scalability, security are huge parts of it, right? And the ability, again, velocity, the ability to change, and so if you're working with people that have a problem with that can be a real challenge, right? Like I don't know how to tell you how to kind of solve all the people problems, of course, but it's all about individuals. But like I think it works really well when you can figure out what somebody's interested in, and just see what they're, kind of watch their behaviors and see the things that they gravitate toward. Are they gravitating toward storage? Are they gravitating toward code? Every time they do something, are they writing code to do it? Put those people in positions to lead on those things, right? To kind of set objectives around those things for the rest of the organization. And just like you said to Tamika, like, if you're going to study it, you need to teach it,
Right.
So I think that really helps a lot.
So when it came down to doing your automation, how did you come up with choosing the HashiCorp tools? Like, what was your vision there? Because if you're in AWS, you could just use Cloud Formation. If you're in Google Cloud, you
Right.
can use their stuff. What drove you to making that product choice?
Yeah, and I honestly didn't make that product choice, but I think a lot of it was about kind of usability of that of HashiCorp software.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a mix of just, a lot of their tools are really pretty powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but accessible.
Right.
But like again, they do come with certain other compromises, right? But like they are, like I think that was the approach for why things got, why those tools were picked for Pedal.
Well, yeah, they allow y'all to be cloud agnostic. You don't have to go and
Yeah.
learn something else for another cloud. Now,
Yeah, but we did, but we have moved towards, toward a very AWS centric
hmm
kind of implementation. Like right now, we lean hard on EC2 and ECS in a very heavily sort of integrated way, right? Like if we had to go do something different, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would, there would be some uplift involved, right? And
right.
we're looking at what happens next, sort of after our current container approach, right? Like should we go to Kubernetes, which is super awesome, can do everything that we need, but is also hard? Do we look at, AWS EKS? Do we look at something all the stuff you were saying, right? That whole rabbit hole up that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at that right now.
Yeah, and then how do you in that approach? How do you ensure security with making that approach for going to a cluster setup like Kubernetes, implementing compliance as code? Are you using outside tools, or you just using everything native to AWS?
Yeah, so the cool thing about the AWS environment is that you do get a lot of kind of security tools out of the box, right? So even just the idea that, kind of the way that things get deployed in AWS and other cloud providers in many cases, they're kind of inherently in certain ways kind of secure by default, right? Like there's a lot of protection that you get out of the box, and you kind of have to work to open things up, which is super great. But it's also, and you also get like certain other tools like, well, now they're kind of packaging them together as the security hub stuff. But they've got their own I forget the names of them because I haven't used them a lot. But they've kind of got their own vulnerability scanner stuff. They've got their own configuration assessment tools,
Mm-hmm.
and those things are really great for AWS. I've kind of shied away from leaning on them very heavily because they are so AWS centric, right? But
Right.
they're like very elegantly, implemented in the AWS way, right? So like they're probably a good solution for a lot of people. Like Inspector, I think is the Inspector is the
Inspect. Yeah.
yeah. But then not to be confused with like INSPEC, which is the kind of compliance as code thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
but
then for
yeah,
you
go ahead.
as a security engineer, like if I want to get into like right now, I have a data analyst background, and I say now, you know what? I know that security should be a part of my idea or my part of my technical experience. But I think I want to look at security engineering. What would you recommend a good starting point?
Yeah, so I think it's I just I think that for so many people right now, it's really important. Like if you're trying to make some kind of adjustment to your career or your mentality, your approach in IT, um, the first thing is just I think soft skills, right? Like there was maybe a moment where if you were a brilliant genius or something like that, like you could get away with kind of whatever you wanted, but that's not the case anymore. Nobody wants to work with you if you're an asshole. Sorry. And then the second thing is just the fundamentals, probably like learning to code actually, right? Kind of being able to do Python, Go, Ruby, those sorts of languages. I mean, you don't have to be kind of a low-level C hacker, right? But like you should be able to manage those kinds of um, high-level programming languages. You should be able to do some stuff with those. And they're specifically, and once you're comfortable with the idea of that, once you're committed to programming, once you're committed to the idea that you should be doing a lot of stuff with programming, like software-defined networking and security and all that stuff. There's one class I think that looks pretty good. I haven't taken it myself, but there's you all might know the SANS Institute. Like there's all kinds of SANS classes. They're pretty expensive, but there's one called SANS Dev for 540, I think. It might be 450, but it's DevSecOps and cloud security, and it's just a really nice package of concepts in one class that looks really good. And I think it's, for like if you're working in a very large company with a lot of legacy, this stuff will be very relevant, but it'll be harder to get to. And if you're in a smaller company or if you're working in cloud native environments, it's going to speak directly to you for sure. That's kind of the direction everybody's going, right?
It's been a lot of talk about cloud native. uh, and building the infrastructure out, and then just in general, K native. Uh, looking
Yeah.
at
Right.
looking at serverless uh, as we start to make that approach. I have often told a lot of people who are headed down the path of security is to make sure you learn Linux and make sure you get some cloud experience in there, and combining those two together should get you a job. Um, the security plus is fine, nothing wrong with getting it, but you need to couple that with some technical skills in order to get it. And like Matt said, some soft skills as well too. Soft skills go a long way, and especially when you're networking and making appearances at conferences and just popping up and just talking to people goes a long way. As much as people like to not say it doesn't, it does. There was a young lady. Give you an example. When we were at Lisa, I introduced her to the hiring manager over at Yale. They conversed, they talked. It's been 4 or 5 months now, and then she has an interview at Yale. But again, keeping yourself open to talk to people and network, even no matter how shy you are, just walk up to the person and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to have a quick conversation with you, maybe another time," and send the person an email, get their card, do something. But don't wait for someone to approach you with to determine your career. Like you're setting yourself up waiting for someone to help you define your career when you have every opportunity to define it yourself. And if the door gets slammed in your face, that's fine. Go kick open another door. In fact, kick open multiple doors. I just saw the Incredibles. Be like Baby Jack Jack. Use your magical powers to do everything. But yes, that has always lent my thing, my thought process when going out and trying to seize opportunities and so forth. If somebody tells me no, that's okay, that's fine. Somebody will tell me yes eventually. Knew that was going to happen. Happens every week.
And to the point about network, again, kind of more networking stuff. I mentioned earlier that my connection into Pedal was a person named Chris, right? So, and I knew Chris from a previous job, but to be specific, I met Chris at a Lisa conference years ago, and through this organization called LAPSA, which is the League of Professional Systems Administrators. I think it's mostly spun down now, but like I met Chris at a conference, like networking there, and eventually recruited Chris to work with me. And then years later, of course, he recruits me to kind of work with him again, right?
Yes. I was trying to get my mom off the phone. Sorry about that. But
Um,
I do remember Chris from Lisa. But also what I do here's what I remember about Lisa. I also felt like it was a conference of people having an idea of where they wanted to go but wasn't sure.
mm,
And I think what happens in tech is we never really know where we really truly want to go without experimenting. So I think the talks open up ideas, not just my talk, even the talks on security, um, open up the idea of possibilities to other things. And so when you're on your career path and journey, don't get so focused on just one thing. That's the beauty of tech. You get a chance to explore and take somebody with you that can explore with you on your journey. I think we can get isolated a lot in tech, and it's very easy to be in a room and whip open a book and spend a whole weekend trying to get your Terraform files to work and get your state up into an S3 bucket, and then fall asleep and hit the wrong button when you have sleep and deletes everything you did. I've done that several times. I'm like, yep, this is why I save multiple files. So just my 2 cents on that. And I'm going to leave this open for Matt to discuss anything that he would like, but I also want to get everybody else's feedback. I've been seeing the comments, great comments. Any questions that anyone wants to ask, just don't think I don't want to drive the conversation, but hey, make sure you ask your questions. Anybody got any other questions? Because I have more, but I want to give you the opportunity as well. Nope. Okay. We're gonna keep rolling.
Yeah, and Tamika, would it be okay if could you help me sort of be able to share my screen real quick? There's just one thing I wanted to show folks if they're interested.
Yeah, you should be able to on the on the third one down from the top. You see an orange arrow. You see your microphone, then the camera, and then there's the one that looks like a little desktop. That should get you to share your desktop.
I don't think I have that.
Let's see.
I had it earlier. You did a thing earlier.
Make presenter.
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, there we go. All right, so 1 second here. Okay, so you should hopefully be seeing this PDF of Model Information Security Portfolio. Can people see that? So this is something I put together that, this is just kind of my take on what I think for a relatively large and healthy company, like what the challenge of security looks like, right? And across the top, you have these different programs. Like you have like application security. You've got things related to accounts. So we say identity and access management, right? But accounts authentication, how you control access, infrastructure security, monitoring and response, risk management, secure data management, managing the security of the vendors you work with and third parties, and then also vulnerabilities. And this is, just everywhere I go, people are always kind of reinventing the organizational model and kind of how to approach these things. This is my take on sort of how to build like the skill sets that you can kind of couple together and kind of work together as strategies. And then across the bottom, kind of an organizational approach where you've got, like the idea is that you got a team of engineers, you got a team of people in operations that are analysts and kind of, they're like threat hunters and stuff like that. And then you got people that are kind of on doing more risk governance and compliance and that kind of thing. And then of course you've got like project portfolio and program management kind of spanning all of those things kind of there at the very bottom, right? But like getting support from project managers, like I think a lot of times and a lot of people in IT, this is not true everywhere, right? But a lot of people in IT who have kind of come up through the operations ladder, like they don't always think that they need project management support and stuff like that. And it's certainly the case that, like, listen, I don't know, maybe you've had bad project managers or whatever, but like really healthy project management is really fantastic, and it's a huge game changer. And so these are just, I just wanted to share this with you all in case that you saw anything here that you really liked, or maybe it piqued some interest or sparked some ideas for you about the different ways to approach, security is so huge, right? And the thing to take away from this is not that you have to do all this stuff necessarily, but that the crazy thing is that this is kind of what industry looks like, right? This is kind of what, like if you fill out a security questionnaire or something like that about your company, you're going to have to answer questions about all this stuff across the top, these kind of 8 programs as I define them. Now, this is not necessarily a better organization than like the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? This is not exactly aligned with that, but this kind of covers everything that thing does. And what I've tried to do is take this, ideas from like ISO and from NIST, CSF, and and all these like other compliance frameworks and so forth, and just kind of like how do you actually design processes and people to manage that stuff, right? Like processes that people can use and kind of orient groups of people around those things. And so that's what this is. You might have any questions about this thing?
I have a question on
Yeah.
your down here on operations: hunt, detect, contain, and maintain.
Yeah.
What does that process look like? I mean, I see the incident response and so forth, but what application is in there that you're using? Because I know, like with the ELK stack, you can search for anomalies with an AI situation there. But how is that looking if we don't have something like an ELK or something in there? What should we use? One
Yeah.
and then what is that? Is that a and for you, is that a separate team, or is that still fall under your team?
Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen at Pedal exactly. So, some people actually outsource this function. So you can get a managed security, managed security service provider that will do this for you. And so basically the way this looks, though, operations for the most part to me is the people who are watching the logs and watching alerts, and they're continually tuning those alerts. And actually, gosh, there's a training that looks really awesome. There's this person named Chris Sanders, and Chris's company is I think you get there via chrissanders.org. I think he's called it like Network Adaptive Defense now or something like. He's got some kind of better company name now, but chrissanders.org, and he's got a training called like the analyst mindset or something like that just looks super cool because it's not about technology, right? It's about it's about kind of the hunger to solve problems and stuff like that. GCIA is another great example of a very popular and highly regarded like intrusion analyst, sort of training, right? The Chris Sanders stuff is very affordable. It is like, I don't know, it's like $500 or $600. So like that's out of pocket, maybe not affordable for people, but like it is, compared to like SANS training and stuff like that is much, much cheaper. And it looks really good, and it can be taken online. And that dude seems to know what he's talking about. He used to work for FireEye, which became Mandiant and so forth. But like I think that operations block, those are the people that are watching your security information and event management system, your SIM, which could be like it's a tool like QRadar, or it could be Splunk, or it could be Elk Stack, right? But it's the place where you're collecting all of your logs and kind of event information centrally, and you're able to correlate those events and logs together to kind of to understand that something is there's some kind of anomaly that could be malicious. And over time, you're like what you're doing there is you've got events that are known to be bad. Okay, like occurrences that are known to be bad, or combinations of events things that are known to be bad. You got things where you don't know whether they're good or bad, and you got things that you're pretty sure are innocuous. And just over time, what you're trying to do is that block in the middle of events that you don't know, you're trying to always get that smaller and smaller and get those events classified as being probably innocuous and probably safe, or getting them classified as, oh, this is really a problem, right? And you're just doing that all the time. And as technology changes, as products change, those events and those logs change, right? As your environment changes, that changes too. And so that's an ongoing kind of never-ending process. And one of the challenges with security today and thinking about where it goes tomorrow is this part, right? This part is some of the hardest part to get traction on, sort of innovating. And so what people are doing there is using machine learning and artificial intelligence to try and get some headway on this problem. And one of the ways that's working really well is not to remove the human analyst from the process, but to take some of the grunt work off of the human analyst, right? So give the human analyst a console that they can log into and where they don't have to do as much work, but what they see there is highly contextualized, right? It's like you got a bunch of rich connected information in there, right? So you see somebody's logged on from a certain place, like you're getting, you're seeing all kinds of other information about that place and that person and that device that they were connected from. You're seeing that all in context, and you're getting some risk scores based on that, and that supports the idea, and that supports the analyst in making a faster and better decision without having to look up all that information themselves. So that's kind of where that's going. Yeah, SOAR, security orchestration and automated response, I think, right? So some of the big SOAR products are the one from IBM is, I forget the one from IBM. Phantom is a big one, and Resilient. Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah, IBM Resilient is a big, and I think Resilient kind of defined the market in a lot of ways. Phantom is pretty popular right now. Resilient and Phantom are the two biggies that I know about. I don't know if people know others. But that's the idea that you can define, you can kind of automate and define some actions, right? So the first thing is being able to understand which events are potentially bad, and then the next thing is being able to automate some actions in response to that. And we are seeing some progress around that stuff. It is it's a little expensive right now. Those things, they're still a little immature, and the less you know about your environment, the harder it is to do this stuff, right? Like if you've got a very dynamic environment, if you've got an environment where, we talk about everything is code. If you've got an environment where very few things are code, it makes this stuff a lot harder. But like I think SOAR is kind of the strategic direction there, and that those kinds of platforms. Yeah. And Phantom was bought recently by Splunk, so they're part of the kind of Splunk family now.
And as you speak on this, and as you continue to talk, it sounds like more serverless concepts as well too, for triggered events surrounding that. And then, how do you see serverless playing out in the fintech realm and getting the security behind that? What are your thoughts there?
Oh yeah, so I mean the the serverless piece is like so the serverless piece is super awesome and also challenging. But the good news is it's not all that different from things we've had to manage before. Like there's just a lot of hidden information there and a lot of hidden circumstances, and so you kind of have to manage it through other assurances, right? Like you don't get to go, it's just like anything, like a lot of the other movements in infrastructure recently, you don't get to control everything. You don't get to see everything that you want to see for security assessment and assurance and so forth. But you need, that doesn't absolve you of kind of needing to do some assessment to that provider's security capabilities, like, what's the scope, what's the network scoping related to these, to the serverless, solutions that you're using. I mean, there's still a few questions in there that are kind of traditional, right? You just have to you don't get to control and see it the same way. And then, and it pushes some of the security also to the API gateways that you're using to kind of, to do more of the serverless stuff, right? And you kind of push some of the controls that were traditionally like on, just load balancers and stuff like that. You kind of move some of those things to API gateways.
And then for in the fintech realm, we also are blockchain. How is that playing out for you with some of the things that you want to do, or is that even not in the vision of what you're looking at?
Yeah, so I think that specifically for Pedal and for me, blockchain is interesting, but we're probably not there yet. There was a joke that went around on Twitter the other day, and it was something along the lines of, everybody's talking about blockchain, but I just want you to patch your stuff, and that's a really compelling point, right? Like most compromises are not sort of like, they're not, dramatic, heroic, sort of, evil 0-day things anymore, right? They're, vulnerabilities that have been around for 3 months or more, and that we just haven't patched yet. And so, like, talking about industry, that's a pretty compelling point. That having been said, like, we really do, it really does feel like there are some problems related to scale that we face, that could be solved with blockchain, right? And that's pretty compelling. One of the interesting things I haven't figured out yet is, and I'm not like a blockchain expert anyway, but like, blockchain is we're really focused, and blockchain's had a few problems, okay, recently, but and there have been some attacks, kind of showing the weaknesses of blockchain. And my impression is that we didn't think, it's not that we didn't think these attacks could happen, it's just like they're just vulnerabilities and there's risk with anything, right? But the anyway, like, I think that just the blockchain for integrity is super cool. Blockchain related to confidentiality, I haven't really figured out yet, right? And my job before this one was in healthcare, and that was sort of a big challenge, I think, for healthcare companies in thinking about how to use blockchain. It feels like blockchain could support work in confidentiality, right? But it couldn't. But it was hard to get the confidentiality done within blockchain itself.
What I've seen with it is attribute access control, ABAC, ABAC, in case I've said that too fast for some. But dealing with attribute based access control, being able to get a little more granular on controls is where I saw blockchain going, in particular in healthcare, but also when it comes to even you yourself controlling your own. I think I can't remember which country it is. They're moving away from social security numbers and they're using blockchain on some of their stuff. I can't remember which country that was.
Estonia, maybe? That sounds like an Estonian thing. They're pretty
Yeah,
up on stuff. I
yeah.
don't know.
And they're moving away from that and start identifying with that. And what comes up often is like, where's infrastructure headed? I listened to the new stack, and I listened to, like, on my drive yesterday, I listened to 5 of their podcasts, and one of the talks was, where, what's going to happen after serverless? What are we going to do after serverless? Um, there, everybody's like, we're moving up the stack where we should have been. We should have been at the top of the stack. We didn't need to worry about the bottom of the stack. But I disagree with that. I think we still need to worry about the bottom of the stack. I think we need to worry about the entire stack. Because look, hey, this is my thought process. Somebody still has to build the stack, and not everybody is moving to the cloud. And if
Right.
they're not moving to a public cloud, they're moving to an on-prem cloud. We still need to worry about the stack. You still need to have the skill sets of DNS. You still need to understand networking. You still need to understand security, data at rest, data encryption, TLS, mutual TLS, SSL, search PKI. Those things are still there. Those still fundamental things that you need to have, wrapped around wrapped around the idea of understanding the basics, the concepts of it.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah, that's absolutely true. So, like, for today, for example, like, we're trying to manage some stuff at Pedal around our, like, around both our transactional emails. So, like, if somebody has a payment due for their credit card, right? We want to send them that their payment is due, or that their statement's ready, right? Or like when we do marketing campaigns and people that have opted into our list, we want them to receive, messages, and we want these messages to go to their inbox, right? We don't want it to go to their junk mail. And all this stuff, like you just mentioned, so many things that, like, I think a lot of people kind of who are focused on full stack engineering, which is very good. Like, that's a very good idea and approach, but, like, they kind of a lot of people focus on full stack engineering end up focused on sort of up like the top of the stack engineering, right? They're not really, like, they say full stack, but they're not really talking about the kind of the bottom of the infrastructure layer and stuff like that. But today, like, listen, you can't talk about doing about creating email campaigns for your company, or even transactional emails and making sure that your customers see those emails. You can't talk about that stuff without credibly without getting into like DMARC, right? And you're not going to be able to talk about DMARC without talking about DNS and just a bunch of other sort of like empirical kind of technology concepts that get taken for advantage of, that we take for granted, I should say, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I guess my last final one. When you are looking to build out your team next, what are you looking for in people from a skills perspective? And those skills can be technical or soft or what have you. But what do you seek from an individual as you look to scale up?
Yeah, so some of the things that are important to our team, I mean, not just skill sets, but like, it's important that we're going to work together as a team, right? And that we have people on the team who share that mindset. That we're not looking for kind of cowboys or whatever. Like, we want people who have the approach of, taking kind of everything as code, right? That infrastructure is going to be code, security is going to be implemented as code, compliance is going to be implemented as code. We're looking for people that have the idea that process is important, but developers and engineers should be able to kind of, like, if you're really going to nurture full stack engineers and support them, there needs to be kind of developer self-service, right, to get the resources they need and the containers they want, or whatever, the environments they want, the tools they need to do their job themselves, without kind of going through, like a lengthy process which might take days or whatever. We want people that share our values about diversity and inclusion. Like, this is important to us. We want people who know how to communicate well. We want people who understand this notion of business value, right? That, like, it's cool if you want to go work on a cool thing, but you need to be there and make sure you're working on things that are important to what our team is doing as a whole, or what the business is doing. We're very focused on things right now about like Jenkins and CI/CD pipelines. We're focused on SAML stuff and like trying to figure out what the right like a new IDP and how to do SAML and SSO and access control. We're trying to figure out how we do like security next, right? We want to integrate security tests into our pipelines. A huge part of the problem with security in industry is a project to product is, yeah, good, great, yes, great recommendation, Reggie. But a huge part of the security challenges in our world, they're actually quality problems, right? And so how do we address quality problems? We address quality problems through testing and like rigorous code support and that kind of thing. And that's true for security too, right? Like, so you can put your security tests, your compliance tests, your compliance preventions, your compliance gates. You can put that stuff in your CI/CD pipeline, and and then for the operations. So there's kind of the engineering security piece. There's kind of the compliance security piece, and so I think there should be something that over time that develops called compliance engineering, and then there's the stuff about the operations, which you were talking about earlier, which looks more and more like the source stuff that we were talking about, but that your analysts who are your day-to-day job is to kind of tune the automation that's giving you the contextual information and refining or developing the runbooks or the playbooks that you can have eventually happen in an automated way, right? Maybe they first start as checklists, but then they develop into being like sort of runbooks and playbooks. I think the biggest thing is that it's like you just need to be hungry to solve problems, and eager to do that stuff. You need to work well with people. You need to have kind of, I think, good cultural attitudes that where you include everybody, right? And work with everyone as a team and welcome all perspectives. And those are the biggies, I think. Like it matters a lot. Like it helps a ton if you've done like CI/CD pipeline things, container things. Like right now, we have a job opening. It matters. Like it would be very valuable for us to have somebody who's got Kubernetes chops, right? Like that would help us a lot to try and understand what we're getting into if we go that direction. So a lot of the kind of hot keywords in DevOps and DevSecOps apply here, but yeah.
And I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to leave the floor open for everybody. I second everything that you said. I also second the biggest piece out of that is being able to work with everybody. Um, and I want to caveat that with being able to work with everybody that is nice and not an asshole, and
Right.
that wants to work with people, and also I want to say that working with good leadership. You could be a good leader, but if you don't have good leadership backing you, it doesn't matter. So making sure you have good leadership, and you know when they're good leadership. I mean, you just know it's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait 5 months to figure this out. You'll know if you're working with good leadership or not. It'll be quite obvious with that. And so I'm gonna start recording, and I'm gonna leave this open for everyone to ask any last minute questions. We've had Matt on the phone for 2 hours uh, going through this. I know he's tired and hungry, but it was good. It was worth it. He
That's a
probably,
pleasure.
it was
It's my
fun. He
honor to
probably
be
wants some
here.
barbecue.
Oh, barbecue sounds good.